About the Chinese-funded empire that stands completely exposed today. The alleged wheelers and the dealers lobbying for China received funds from Beijing and were even coached to glorify China on social media platforms at the cost of berating India. Now, the legal trouble is also mounting on the alleged Chinese mouthpiece, with the Delhi High Court issuing a notice to NewsClick and its editor-in-chief Prabir Purkayas in a response to a plea by the Enforcement Directorate regarding a money laundering case. Now, the Enforcement Directorate is seeking a stay on the two orders that was previously passed in 2021, granting protection to NewsClick and Purkayas from any coercive action to be taken. The court has now found merit in the ED's argument that there was criminal conspiracy to bring in unaccounted money from abroad. But Times Now has now accessed another smoking gun showing a concerted effort to praise China while denigrating India. Well, after March 2020 mail from Neville Roy Singham to his cabal working on an overdrive to whitewash China's image and protect it as a nation that mastered the art of handling the COVID crisis, Vijay Prasad tweeted 3 articles to showcase China's COVID fight back. In the same month, NewsClick also published a report titled, "Is India Losing the Battle Against COVID?" Now, Times Now gets you the mail trail that goes back from 10th of June 2016 that shows how NewsClick's editor-in-chief was actively involved in not just doing Chinese propaganda, but advancing China's interests while living in India and claiming that they are independent journalists. Now we get you a fresh set of perspective. The emails between Prabir Purkayas and his associates. This one is about making a documentary on China's maritime route and essentially saying that global maritime trade needs to be reconfigured in the favor of China.
So what was the email that was sent in March 2020 say? That email said, "We are working together on a 3-part series article on China." Can we go back to that, please? "We are working together on a 3-part series of articles on China and the handling of the coronavirus. They will be originally syndicated by Globetrotter, then all 3 will be assembled into a tricontinental publication. This tricontinental is the one which is headed by Vijay Prasad." It says here, "Do not circulate any of these materials outside the group. Vijay must have control. Once it is published, then it can be circulated." What was eventually done? Here you have Vijay Prasad, the man mentioned here. Vijay must have control. The email said, working on a 3-part series. To the T, that instruction has been followed. This instruction, by the way, was given by Neville Roy Singham to Prabir Purkayas. Vijay Prasad was in on the plan. So on instructions of Neville Roy Singham, dutifully, this is published. The first part talks about, how China's response has been. Part 2 is on how China learned about SARS-CoV-2 in the weeks before the global pandemic. We forensically trace how Chinese health authorities came to understand the mysterious virus, determined it was more than normal, and acted swiftly to report it to the WHO. So there was the dictation, and then there was the delivery. The COVID cover-up was executed to the T. The second article, they say, is going to discuss how China learned quickly when handling the crisis. Here you have how China broke the chain of infection, namely how State Communist Party and public action in a determined way overcame the virus. There is no room for complacency since it might not be over yet, but there is much to learn here. Then another one says, a contrast to countries like US and China. This is all part of the same email. They said, you must draw a contrast to countries like US and India, who with so much lead time are still unable to ramp up kit production or procurement. And sure enough, here is an article printed in April 2020 saying, is India losing the battle against COVID-19? So instructions were given by people who were on China's payrolls, and they were executed to the T by NewsClick. The question is, why was all of this being done? This is part 1 of our expose. Now let's tell you about how India's interests in maritime trade were being impacted. This is the latest email that we have here in the possession of Times Now. Here we have the email that is sent by Prabir Porkayast to Shastri Ramachandran on the 10th of June 2016. It says, in touch with former naval commander, talking of doing a documentary. Great, a documentary is being made by NewsClick. Now, what does this documentary say? Documentary on China's land and maritime Silk Route. Why? Why do they want to make this documentary? Because on what is global maritime trade and reconfiguration of global trade. Essentially, this documentary says, we want to reconfigure global trade. In whose interest? Documentary on long-term change from ocean powers to Asian landmass becoming economic center. The documentary that they are talking about essentially says that China now must be projected as the great maritime power, because ocean-based empires is the future. Land empires fell with the rise of ocean-based empires. Who was making this documentary to ensure that China becomes the next ocean-based empire? An Indian publication, an Indian journalistic website is actively on the interests, on the instructions of somebody who is speaking for China, saying, we will push for China to become the ocean empire through maritime trade.